to do, because there's a semblance of power that you relinquish to another person when you completely rely on them financially. And let's be very honest, it's not everybody you can trust with that kind of power over you. In fact, it's not advisable to trust with anybody with that kind of power over you. It's important to work on yourself in ways that you're independent enough so that the decisions that you make in relationships are independent of your financial situation. Because you hear stories of people who are staying in relationships just because it's a roof over their heads, you know. And I don't think it's not a fair trade for yourself.
Right. You know, we're also looking at one's motivation for doing such things. You said it's a level of desperation, and that desperation is caused by very many, you know, causes and situations. But we never speak about someone's hopes and dreams and everything. You know, someone just gets into a relationship for whatever reason. This other person is magnified, or they become their focus, and then they don't even work on the things that make them feel alive. You know,
I'd go even further and say we live in a time where most people don't even know the things that make them feel alive. We live in a time where we are chasing material things, we are chasing the things that we think we want, other than the things that might bring us actual satisfaction, that might bring us fulfillment, you know. So you'll find a lot of the times, even in relationships, right? People match, they feel like they are compatible with someone based on how somebody carries themselves externally. Who you are, like the things that make you you, they no longer matter. And I say they no longer matter because most of the time, especially now, people don't even know who they are. They don't even know themselves, you know. That's why you'll find a lot of relationships right now, they are relationships of convenience, you know. But if you get to the bone of it, there's nothing that keeps these two together other than the things that they do for each other, you know.
I see. You know, in our conversations, especially, you know, from last week and the week before, we're speaking about identity. And the other time we also spoke about, you know, like basically get into a relationship when you are sure or you know what you want and the like. But society today, everything is predicated on money. You cannot have a conversation where you will not highlight money. You will not even talk to the opposite sex if you do not have money, you know. And for women, they're looking for, and for men, they want to have it, right? So again, I'll ask you right now, why do you feel money is such a big conversation, especially now?
When you take away the things that give you intrinsic purpose, what are you left with other than the material? You know? So when there's that vacuum within us, so when I say vacuum, it's because we haven't taken the time to develop ourselves, right? And that's because of many societal pressures, you know. But at the end of the day, you'll find people who are of a certain age, but you don't even know yourself, you know. So what the things that you end up chasing are the things that you can see. And what can you see? It's the material stuff. I want that car, I want that house, I want this career. Not because it actually aligns with who you are as a person, but because it checks some certain boxes that you've been told you should be able to check at a specific age, you know. And we live, and it kind of makes me sad, because you can tell by how society is crying out in different ways in terms of the depression rates, in terms of the mental health of the nation, in terms of alcoholism, in terms of chemical dependence on various substances. People are dealing with a vacuum of internal, there's something missing, you know.
A void, basically.
A void, exactly.
Yeah.
And I empathize a lot because there is nowhere, it's very, very hard to find spaces where people are actually like bringing to the forefront all the benefits that exist when you're chasing something that is intrinsically valuable to you, you know. Chasing a career that gives you joy, a passion that it's something that even though nobody paid you, you do it. Because those are the things that they give you joy. They wake you up in the morning, you know. They give you that energy to keep going. But now you find a lot of people who they've achieved success at things they don't even like, which is so unfortunate, to work so hard, right, and succeed at something you hate, you know.
Yeah. You know, we also speak about relationships and just look at the love aspect, and then now, of course, the toxic nature, what should be done and what should, like, there's so many do's and don'ts all over the internet, and everyone seems to have a perspective on the experience or what should be done, but no one speaks about like what are you like bringing to the table per se, not just what you do in a career, but like who you are, like what are you adding to this person and what are you not adding, you know what I mean? So is it worth something that someone feels they can, what do you say, like work on, you know, like when we're looking at worth, it's not part of the conversation. It's just that you look cute. Let's
He
go
checked
out.
this box, this
Yes,
box, this
yeah,
box.
yeah, like a bucket
He's in
list.
finance, 6 foot,
that,
you know that trend?
That is basically it, yeah.
And it's rather unfortunate because, okay, to be very brutally honest, that's a difficult conversation to have with anyone. It's difficult. So most people will opt not to have it. It's easier to talk about the accomplishments that people can see, you know, but to talk about the things that really mean something to you, it's difficult because you're putting out your heart out there and you're hoping somebody will accept it. You're hoping somebody will be able to actually see, you know, why is this important to me? You risk.
And why do we feel the need of acceptance? Because of what is missing?
We are human beings. It's the same reason why human beings will always seek affection and connectivity. It's the same reason why we seek acceptance. It is just in us, you know. And there's nobody who feels safe or anyone who feels comfortable in a space where they don't feel fully accepted, you know. And it's a risk to put that out there. It's like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about. This person can either accept you, reject you, ignore you, you know, and that hurts. It's easier for you to like, oh yeah, but this is what I do, you know, this is what I'm about. This is look at my feng shui, you know. And people get all caught up with that. And at the end of the day, whether they reject it or not, it's there. But it doesn't mean enough so that even though this person were to reject it, doesn't really mean anything to me, you know. So that risk is one that most people are not willing to take.
I see. Let's also take a look at exactly when someone is, you know, someone once asked, you know, a younger audience, when you guys are in a relationship, exactly what do you talk about?
Oh.
You know, because if money is always the conversation, at the end of the day, there's the human connection. There's you just maybe having a low time or a high time, you know, you're human, like you said, you know. So what are the conversations when that is the only conversation?
Unfortunately, the depth of the conversations people are having in relationships only go as far as the trauma that they're willing to share. Oh, I went through this. It's a story that people are telling about their past, you know, because a lot of relationships, the thing that is connecting them is a trauma bond. That is as far as it goes. Imagine I went through this. Imagine I went through this. If it's not that, that void is filled with entertainment. It's filled with activities, you know. But that, can we just sit here in silence and just spend time together? Can we just get to actually understand one another? Like, this is who I am. These are my weaknesses. These are my strengths, you know. It's easier for me to come and tell you, oh, but this happened to me when I was a kid, or this happened, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you find a lot of these conversations in relationships, the depth, the emotional depth of it only goes as far as talking about the things that may have harmed this person while they were growing up, you know. So you find people know each other's stories, but they don't understand who these people are. They don't understand what those stories did to them, you know. So I can connect to your past, but who you are right now, how can I connect to you if you don't know yourself?
So is it a trend to trauma bond instead, unfortunately?
To say it's a trend is to say it's something that is being pushed or is something that is being adopted by everyone.
But if you look at a section of social media, most of the time, if I want empathy from you, and even if I want to be financially dependent, and you know my story, maybe you know I grew up in this particular background, you know the things I've gone through, you're more sympathetic or empathetic towards me. So that already creates a bond out of that, like you said, the trauma, the information. And maybe you're from a well-off family or you have a good job or whatever it is. So we are bonded, right?
Well,
so it keeps on. I mean, even the movies we are watching, it's an upstairs, sometimes downstairs kind of situation.
I completely see that point. And okay, I think these things are happening right now because it's convenient. Right? We are all taking the path of least resistance in our relationships, you know, and we're saying, okay, this is an easier way to connect. Let me just tell you about all these messed up things that happened to me as a kid or whatever, right? It's easier to talk about that. It's easier to connect at that level than to actually have a conversation that it's a bit risky in the sense of, what if I tell this person this ABCD about who I am right now and they don't like it, you know? So it's the path of least resistance for a lot of relationships right now. It's like, okay, this is what I am willing to give. This is safe. I can do this without giving too much away, you know. So it becomes something that we've all adopted. Yeah.
You know, when you also look at that kind of bonding, and then you look at the conversations, like I mentioned earlier, that are around that, it's never something that someone will perceive at the end of the day, it will end well. sometimes people go into these relationships already knowing that it may not last, but then having like you've paved the way in your mind somehow that I'll be okay in case it doesn't, because I mean, who can be sincere, who can be loyal? So there's the expectation of loss before the loss happens, you know, and that attitude is also put in money.
It's a defense mechanism. How is it that you expect to succeed at something that you've already foreseen your failure? Because hope is an expensive thing emotionally.
And that's why, Thurgood, I'll go back to the point of this being a trend. You know, it may not be a trend that is called a trend. You know, basically just, you know, out there with it. Yeah. But it's more so things that you'll hear very many young people saying, you know, we're just hoping that this will work. But the intensity of what it will take from you gets you ready for the next person, and you're not ready. What's your perspective on that?
It's how is it that you start something and you go with it, you go in it with the mentality of I'm doomed to fail? You know, it's rather unfortunate. And yeah, as I said earlier, path of least resistance. But if you actually sit down with it and actually process it, right now, the thing that is so easy like to show everybody else is the material, the outside stuff, you know. And this outside stuff, it gives people comfort to like, no, I can be in a relationship, I can have all these things without actually ever having to be myself. So if I'm going into this thing, it's for a season because I'm at this economic level. But once I've leveled up, this person, I'll leave them at, you know. And it's because first and foremost, we have turned our relationships into transactional, you know, settings. And it's not the person who loses out, it's you two. You're playing, you're both being fools in that moment in time, you know.
Yeah.
And it's all out of fear, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's driven by fear and insecurity. So
the ideal is being very open. It's like this intimacy at the end of the day is risky. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're in a good place with yourself or this other person is, it's a risky affair. So ideally, how is this supposed to look like? If you are saying that you are financially dependent, there are a few scenarios. Is it that maybe you're married or you're with someone for a while, you know their characters, so you know that maybe if I'm this way, they'll be able to support you because of different seasons? Or if you're dating someone and somehow things work out and they're willing to help you, you know. So ideally, how is this supposed to look like if you say, okay, fine, this is a dependence that will work?
Well, the goal, dependence is not necessarily a good thing, especially like you're not a minor, like you're a grown person, in the sense of interdependence is the goal.
Yeah.
So you'll find in a lot of these cases, the best way, or rather the way that is most safe for most people, it's getting to a point where you've built enough trust. You've built, that connection is so deep that whether or not you're providing, whether or not this is happening, the relationship is not affected by this one thing that you may be happening to do. If it's supporting someone, if it's opening a business, taking someone to school, you name it, right? Whether I'm able to do it or not doesn't necessarily matter. The most important thing is us. Are we okay? If you're okay, if that foundation is set in stone, if that foundation is steady, if that foundation has been consistent enough, then you can start relying on each other on these different things. Because once you've gotten to know somebody like that, intrinsically, we're all driven to want to be there for the ones that we genuinely love, you know? And that's why, like right now, like people, especially men, we have this entitlement when it comes to, we will do something for a woman and expect her to behave a certain kind of way because, see, I did this.
Yeah.
You know? And the reason why that is so risky is because this action was not done out of genuine love or affection for someone. It was done in exchange for something else, you know? Yeah. So I feel like you cannot skip that step of going through the process of, I want to get to know you. To know you, to love you, to go through that, the ups and downs of what makes a relationship, you know. And then from there, let's talk about, okay, how is it that I can help this person? And you'll find most of the time that these are things that come easy. Once you get to that level, you don't even have to say, by the way, I have this need. This person is thinking about you to the extent of, what do they need? How can I help them out? And it works both ways.
I see.
Yeah.
There's the illusion of time that, you know, playing the field has been a thing for a long time. So it's not coming with, you know, right now in society or this generation. It's always been there, you know, like sow your oats, go out, do your thing. But then before you know it, you're maybe 35.
Yeah.
You're like, what have I been doing with my money and everything, you know, and people want to settle, but things have moved and you're also different, and the person maybe you wanted to settle with is different. You know, so there's so many factors that it's like there's supposed to be a balance, but this balance is also almost like an illusion. Like there's no per se proper scheduling, if I may call it that way. So at the end of the day, how is time perceived, especially when you're looking at financial dependence, purpose, growing yourself, having a relationship? And I mean practically, not ideally.
Yeah.
Because ideally, most of the time, it doesn't go in the way.
Well, realistically, like what's happening with most people, it's life has it doesn't have a syllabus. You know what I mean? Things, you cannot skip stages in the sense of the timeline is different for different people. Some people experience success in their career when they're in their 40s or their 50s. Some people that comes earlier, and that depends on field. It depends. It's so individual. It's based on somebody's individual journey, you know. And that's something that is it's up in the air. But the thing that stays the same, it's the process. The process for most people is similar, and people have written books from the beginning of time about this, in the sense of you go from this point to this point to this point, because success can only be sustained with a certain level of character, a certain level of discipline, you know. And it's not just in like career-wise. We're talking about relationships, we're talking about your interpersonal interactions with your friends, your development as a human being. And the misconception that we have is it will get to a certain point where it will come naturally. You would have seen enough, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a lie. That's a lie.
Yeah, there's always that perception that, you know, what are you, you know, hiring for? Like, what is it? And then the peer pressure to perform or be a particular way. But you know, Togu, there's a catch-22 here, because there are people who focus entirely and they maybe reach even 50 or 45 or whatever, and that is when they want to now, it's like the focus goes, but the maintenance of the character, quote unquote, is still there. The character to perform, you know, like career-wise, it's still there. You know, and you've seen now with older men and younger women, like the people who they couldn't access before, now with some different, you know, amount of money, or more money rather, they can. Or for some younger, you know, women, they want to settle. Like the scales never balance, and society tells you this is how it will always be. I had a guest who said once you see things like that, you have to accept them in the way they are, because that's how it is. Do you believe the same? Well,
as I said earlier, life has no syllabus, and balance is a thing that can be attained if you apply yourself consistently, right? Everybody says it's something that it's not supposed to go that way, and that's a mold people keep breaking all the time. And we see it. We see people who, they get married when they're 50, joyfully, and they have beautiful marriages. You have people who have kids later on in life. We have kids who, they break those social molds of this is how it is, or this is how it's supposed to be. And the reality, that's usually most cases. That's how things are on the ground, you know. And we have to be very honest with ourselves, right? Time is not an indicator of preparedness. Time is not an indicator of the kind of access that you'll have. Because let's be very honest, there are people who have built themselves in various ways, right? And they have gotten access to various spaces because of the resources that they've acquired, or the experience that they've acquired, right? But because of how they've developed themselves, they are the fools in those rooms. You know, they're the ones everybody's trying to keep off in those rooms. So it doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. And people talk about it all the time. You hear like women complain about it all the time. It's like, I'm with this guy, he's this age, but he's so immature. He's so, you know. And it's because we're expecting time to have this compound effect on a human being that, oh yeah, by now you should have learned these things. And the truth of the matter is the process remains the same.
You know, you're a young man, and there's a whole lot that you speak about, you know, for example, in your past, the things that you did, you wouldn't want to do again, and, you know, and your focus right now. How do you, can I say, how sure are you that you wouldn't fall into, you know, some of the issues or traps that you find, you know, most of the men going through because of real societal issues, especially when it comes to finances?
One thing I'll be very honest about, and this is something I've been very consistent on, I speak a lot from hindsight. not as a person who has not made those mistakes. I've made those mistakes. I have been a victim to those pitfalls of, yeah, maybe I can use resources to get the kind of relationship that I want. I've made those mistakes and realized how foolish it was. I've been in spaces where I've seen those errors being made, you know, and there's no cookie cutter way about it. And one thing I will be able to tell like young guys, right, it's don't be scared to make those mistakes, you know. But at the end of the day, the lessons that I learned going through that is, this is not for me, this is not who I am. As much as society is pushing me to go this way, this does not align with the human being that I am, right?
But when did you come to that realization? Because someone would still say, you're still young. Yeah, you were young. So they would argue, given you would still make those mistakes.
And I will make mistakes.
Yeah.
But it all comes at a point of crisis. It's like, you know, when they say for alcoholics, right? When you get to rock bottom, that's when you want to start changing, right? You'll get to the end of you. You'll start doing things in such a way you're like, what am I doing? You know, for me, that experience came to me when I was surrounded by what everybody thinks a young guy would want. You know, women, you name it, you know, and I was really unsatisfied. I'd never been more unhappy with myself. Like, that was the lowest.
When you're around all those things.
I never felt more lonely when I was in a room surrounded by women who wanted me, which was kind of like, I was like, okay, something needs to change, you know.
Yeah, some people would tell you, are you sure?
Certain.
You know, because of our society is, I mean, the mockery is infinite.
It's true, and the thing that actually makes me kind of sad is a lot of us have adopted this mindset of you're not willing to learn from others' mistakes and you want to go through it by yourself. I can tell you how that process feels like in a very brief conversation, but how it felt and the effect it had on me took me years to undo that damage, you know. And it's like, okay, you don't have to get to the end of it for you to realize, but this is not intrinsic to me. You can start working on those things early enough, you know. And the unfortunate thing is you have so many young guys who are like, you're telling us, even me, I want to experience it, then I'll come tell you. You know, and unfortunately, for some people, that's a one-way street. Because not everybody is able to come back from that, you know.
I see.
Because it has compound effects on your soul, on your spirit. It hurts you, you know. And it's not necessary pain.
I
you
see.
know what I mean?
That's very powerful. And we do not get enough time to speak about now what you've mentioned throughout this conversation, which is how you feel. You know, we glide over it, we slide over it. In fact, mental health sometimes is talked about in a way that is a bit casual because it's very common, and there are very many advocates and who are real and they're doing a great job. But the rates of suicides, the rates of assault in relationships are quite high. We've also spoken about femicide here. Attacks, abuses, all that toxicity is insanely high despite all that, you know, and it is because of not being able to be real, right? So how do people get there so that trust is a two-way traffic?
Acceptance is a big part of it, right? If you look at the psychology behind abusive relationships, they're all centered around insecurity, you know, and insecurities lose a lot of their power over you once you get to the point of acceptance. I feel this way about myself, you know, and you'll find a lot of abusers intrinsically, they fear they're unlovable, they fear that they will appear to be weak. And the truth of the matter is they are. And the difference between a person who feels like that and is not abusing someone is somebody who has accepted, okay, this is what's going on right now, right? This is how I feel, what's causing this, you know? But now we have a whole bunch of guys, and by the way, this is that, and you can see it in the number of femicides, you can see in the number of assaults that we're seeing nowadays. It speaks to the void that exists when it comes to insecure people looking for other insecure people, and even victims. Victims, the thing that they have in common with the abusers is insecurity. Victims feel like, I'm not lovable. Nobody can love me. This is the only person
They feed into each other.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's how they're able to identify each other. That's how they're able to draw and lock into one another, you know. And it's a very unfortunate thing.
All right. Rick, we're taking a short break. We'll be back with more of this conversation. Stay with us. Yeah, I mean, it's